Book 3. The Council of the Ages. Chapter 4. Part 2.
Anora, are you? A dwarf of the age of Kritus appeared before them, according to Tanya's calculations, although for the rest of the Sharnaries races it is difficult to calculate the exact age of a dwarf. The dwarf was accompanied by an entourage of hill dwarfs. Kritus found it difficult to assimilate the presence of the dwarf in the room because it was something totally unexpected. Tanya immediately recognized who they were, dwarfs of the hills. It was an embassy from the city of Lismeria, in the kingdom of Lanos. This kingdom was located in the southern hemisphere of Sharnaries, where most of the hill dwarfs migrated after their banishment. Tanya, belonging to the nobility, knew well the genealogy of the rest of the dwarf royal families, which were not many either. The dwarf was Anora Fatfoot, widow of the king's firstborn prince. She was the queen's envoy for the Council of the Ages. Fallen Colin Pardas. Brownhills. You're a Brownhill. Kritus watched Tanya suspiciously as she discovered a secret that few in the company knew. Anora smiled. The second son of King Byasterius Brownhills. But didn't the second son die when the city of Bartalium fell? Tanya asked surprised. As if he were dead. Kritus disowned the dwarfs of the hills, never accepted that we did not retreat before the Stufos. The dwarf did not open his mouth at Anora's words, he was just staring at her. Your sister, the queen, misses you, Kritus. The queen and all of you are cowards. It was a war that could not be won. We leave the land of our ancestors. Tanya was surprised. Kritus did not seem to accept Anora's explanations and left shotgun to where the rest of his companions were. The dwarf bowed to Anora as a farewell gesture and followed Kritus. You're a prince. Like you. And look what it is for. Not a word to anyone or you will receive a bolt from me in the ass. Does anyone know? The little Denkga put me in everything. They reached the height of the rest of the group, who were leaning in their corner, few integrated into the superficially relaxed atmosphere. Arian and Aris, since he was his partner, were integrated into the environment. Another who moved like a fish in water was Gosberg, who was able to strike up a conversation with many people while drinking 2 or 3 drinks at the same time. He was the center of attention, as always. Gosberg's uninhibited attitude caused envy on the part of the other mercenaries. Loranthas also approached some elves who came from her homeland and began to talk animatedly with them. Being of elf blood, he could integrate perfectly in the midst of the numerous groups that were chatting in a lively way. Kush had placed himself in a secluded position within the group. The magician watched with interest everything that happened in the hall. Many of the most important cultures of Sharnaries were represented in the Council of the Ages, and it was the only opportunity to see so many great kings together. He had observed Kritus's talk with the embassy of the dwarfs of the hills, which ended in a not very friendly way. But then he saw how a person stared at him. They had not seen each other for years, of course, but she was still as beautiful and powerful as ever. Her name, Gabla Lamaria. Gabla's personal guard came up to where Kush was and they bowed their heads. Kush responded in kind, the guards pointing to where Gabla was sitting. Kush decided to advance towards it through the entire room. Gabla was alone. Someone from Isis didn't usually interact with the rest of the Sharnaries people. It was very strange that they had come to the call of the king of Bordalania. The lady was savoring a glass of elf wine in a leisurely manner when she observed Kush's arrival. The magician assumed that Gabla knew of his presence at the council. After all, she was the great Gabla. Gabla's personal guard placed a chair next to the grand lady, in a position below her. Only the king had the right to stand above Gabla. Or her atom. Kush Asmara. Your shadows honor me, Gabla. Kush had long since exiled himself from Isis, but he still remembered the way he treated Gabla, and that was recognizing that she was superior to him. The displays of power when it came to treating Gabla never ended well. Your father told me that everyone misses you, Namish. And so did I. There was some bitterness in Gabla's words. Kush kept his gaze. I hadn't thought about that time for a long time. Everyone is looking forward to your return. It can't be. Don't forget, I'm guilty. I was only saved from the death sentence because I was the son of the king. He spared my life unjustly. The people were offended by that, certainly. But now it is forgotten and they will accept your return. I made a mistake and the gods wanted me not to pay for it with my life. But that decision of my father's provoked war among our people. Gabler took a sip of the drink. Namish. It was only an excuse, the poison looks for any small wound to rot. I think it will take time for Gabler to forget. Those who remember it the most are no longer a problem. Namish, I took care of them personally. It is not the time. The magician again rejected Gabler's offer. I have the impression that you will never return home. Kush stood up bowing to the great Gabler Lamaria to disappear into the crowd. The doors of the hall opened and the guests entered another large room where the banquet was to be held. The great room was a huge place, where all the guests were received by a series of butlers who indicated to each one their place in the room. Arian and Aris were seated at the head table next to the great kings. The rest of the group were placed at the table furthest from the room, next to the waiter's entrance, and on the other side there was a huge column that hid them from the rest. Sabu took a seat in an area next to the wall, without a chair. Agnorak had to stand on the outermost side of the table. Although they were at the end of the large room, they were attended to in a correct way, there was never a lack of food or drink. Bottles of elf wine, spirits, maybe beer was scarcer than expected. The meal consisted almost entirely of fruits, vegetables, cheeses, nuts. But there was no shortage of fish and seafood. The only meat they saw was from a species of bird of a considerable size that they served roasted. But the dishes tasted nice and were delicately spiced, perhaps for the orcs the food was a bit bland. An orchestra played soft, harmonic music that accompanied the meal. The truth is that the evening was quite pleasant, and the mercenaries began to drink an enormous amount of wine. They were very hungry, after so much travel. In addition, it was a food that was quickly devoured, with 4 orcs and 2 hungry denkies apart from the dwarfs who did not moderate themselves at mealtime either. The only one who seemed to behave with some restraint was Kush. It was the table where the most people ate by far. After an hour many of the waiters seemed to only serve at the table at the back. That made many pay attention to those strange guests who were eating and drinking as if there was no tomorrow. Even Arian, who was quite far away, ended up noticing them. He was happy because it seemed that they were having a great time, against the sobriety of the table of honor where the food was barely touched. They were obviously not alone, but their jovial and carefree character contrasted greatly with the seriousness of the other tables. At the next table were a number of elven knights, who were placed there by a Machiavellian idea of Prince Erinch. He had assigned to that table all the knights of the order he detested by way of insult. Paulana was one of those chosen wretches.